Namaste and a happy new year to you all. At Vedanta Vision, we bring you the highest knowledge in a simple way. Click the link in the description box to join our WhatsApp community and receive inspiration regularly. Let's make the new year brighter together. I now invite Jayaji to continue with chapter 2.
ॐ सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः
Any questions? Yeah.
When we experience some severe physical pain, that time what should we do to maintain equilibrium?
When we experience physical pain, at that time, what should we do to maintain equanimity? The question itself is wrong because it's like saying, I have not bought insurance for my car. The car is burning. Who will insure my car now? So your insurance agent will come and say, I want to inspect the car. It's not there, it's burned to ashes. You think anyone will insure your car? Similarly, in life, you must learn this or fortify yourself with knowledge before the calamity. Not after it's hit you. Then you can't do anything, you just suffer. So what happens is, whatever practice you've put in, whatever effort you've put in before the tragedy, before the incident, that will stand by you. You don't need to make an effort. Little bit effort you can make, I am Atman, I am not the body. But if you haven't put in the effort earlier, this is not going to help you. You say, I am Atman, I am not the body, you're feeling the pain, you have identified with the body, you are the body. There's nothing you can do, you just suffer. This is the fact. It may be not a very palatable fact, but it is. So therefore, you have to put in the effort when everything is all right. See, thank God everything is okay for all of us now. This is the time to put in the effort. So who knows what's going to happen tomorrow? Why tomorrow? 5 minutes from now, we have no idea what will happen. So you have to be prepared for any eventuality. Not expect calamity to hit you. If you are expecting, then you are a pessimist. But you are an optimist. You are not thinking of all the bad things that will happen to you, but you are prepared for any eventuality. Because you understand the fragile nature of life itself. That anytime anything can happen to your body, your mind, your intellect. The only thing that will remain with you is Atman, the spirit. So the more you identify with the spirit, the better it is for you. Okay? Any other question?
Vasanas give rise to thoughts which are converted to desires, and these propel us to act. Now, if the desire itself, the mind itself is propelling us to act, then how does the mind, obstruct it with likes and dislikes? For example, desires are a function of the mind. So now thoughts arise, thoughts converted to desires, and desires propel action. propelling that action. And desires are a function of the mind. But then we say the action sometimes is obstructed by the likes and dislikes of the mind. So how is it also propelling action but also obstructing it?
See, her question is that the chronology of action is when you have a vasana for a particular thing, let's say vasana for music, you think of music, thoughts come in your intellect for the music. And then these thoughts consolidate as a strong desire for music, and this converts into action, which is you go and sing or you attend a concert. Now she's saying, if this is the chronology of action, then we also say that the mind obstructs action. The likes and dislikes of the mind come in the way of action. How is it so? See, the mind is not unidirectional. The mind is full of different kinds of thoughts and desires. Like right this moment, you are sitting here, you are listening to this. Why have you come here? Because you have a desire to be here. But having come here, your thoughts may go to the home. Your thoughts may go to a movie that you wanted to see. Your thoughts may go to a friend that you wanted to meet. Mind can go anywhere. Mind is not unidirectional. Intellect has the capacity to be unidirectional. But even that is not so because the intellect is not strong enough. So, anything can come and obstruct. You get it? Also, there is a clash between the intellect and the mind. Mind itself, 2 desires, 5 desires can obstruct each other. So, what we do is we perform self-cancelling actions. You want to come here, you want to go home, you want to go to watch a movie, all 3 cancel themselves out. So you don't give yourself entirely to any one thing. Right? Which is why most Indians, they will never focus on one thing. Like you come here, then you are scrolling on the phone. You'll say, how do I know? I am seeing the tamasha that's going on. Then why do you come here? You might as well sit at home. But you can't because your mind is taking you in different directions. Okay? Therefore, it is all the more important that you fortify your intellect and get yourself to be in one place completely. You see, your body is here, mind is somewhere else, intellect is in a third place. What kind of a disjointed personality are you? So you don't achieve anything. Any other question?
How do I know that when I act, my vasanas are getting exhausted or they are increasing because of vasana?
Very good question. When I act, how do I know whether my vasanas means desires are increasing, which means I'm going downhill, or they are reducing, which means I am evolving spiritually? How do I know? First of all, your intellect should drive your action, not desire per se, not like and dislike. So if your action is motivated by a mere like or just desire, then what happens? That action boomerangs back on you as one more desire for the same thing. It's like a car driving in the monsoon. What happens? The water, it picks up the water and it splashes back onto the car. So all the mud gets onto the car. That is why you have, they're called mud guards, right? You know what a mud guard is? It's a piece of rubber that is there to prevent the mud from coming back onto the car. Intellect is like that. Intellect prevents this backlash. So with every action, not only do you get the fruit of that particular action, which is success, but you evolve spiritually because that desire is exhausted, that particular vasana. Vasana, thought, desire, action, it ends then. It doesn't come back on you as one more desire. So, the use of the intellect is very important. Why are you performing that action? Second, it becomes even more potent if your action is driven by a higher goal. So, if you are performing action for a higher goal, then not only does that particular vasana get exhausted, but a whole lot of other desires at the lower level wane away. So that's a far more powerful action. And the most powerful action is action dedicated to God. You perform that action because you want realization, you want to go beyond the world, you're interested in the transcendental, you couldn't care less for anything in the world. That's potent action. So depending on, you know yourself why you are performing that action. First of all, if there is no awareness, 100% you are going downhill. You are just acting on desire. Anything else? See, I'm glad questions are coming like this, because what happens is the rest of us who don't ask questions, it's not that we know the answer. In fact, in future I should ask anyone who knows the answer. It's not that we know the answer, but the question has not occurred to us. Why has the question not occurred to us? Because there is no thinking after the class. After the class, what are you thinking? Where do I go and have dinner? Or I was supposed to call somebody. I don't know whether this check has got realized. I don't know whether that money has come into my account. I don't know. Or I was supposed to go and play cards. I missed out this evening. All this comes. So the flood of worldly thoughts coming. And then this thought gets, because these thoughts are subtle. They need to be cultivated. You need a peaceful mind to mull over these ideas. That's why we recommend that you sit quietly for just a minute. Why are you rushing? Everyone runs as if, I don't know. Sit quietly for a minute, gather your thoughts, then go. And on the way home, those few minutes that you have to yourself, think, what am I taking away from this class? How can I apply it in my life? And then that you get the power. So, even if one person asks a question, all of us benefit from the answer. Now, today is a very special day because some of you know, it is Gita Jayanti. So, it is the one day in the year that we pay homage to the Bhagavad Gita. Now, normally, traditionally, they perform puja, they keep the Bhagavad Gita in the altar, they put flowers on the Bhagavad Gita, they do a prayer, and that's the end of it. So, barring those few minutes, you are materialistic before, you are materialistic after, nothing has changed. But with us, since we need to understand each verse and extract the essence from the verse and try and apply it in our lives, today we should also do something special, which is, most importantly, commit ourselves to our own development and try and weed out all the things that are coming in the way of our pursuit. It could be a thought, it could be an attachment, it could be a new activity you've started. Because the mind is like that, you know. The mind is on the lookout for some entertainment. So it goes like this, all over. It catches something, latches onto it. And then before you know it, you're off at a tangent. When do you realize? When you're 1 foot in the grave, half dead, then you say, oh, I was supposed to do something else. Too late. So what happens? Punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam. Again and again and again you go through the same thing. So this occasion, Gita Jayanti, is a reminder for us to withdraw. Not withdraw from the world, but withdraw from unnecessary distractions that you have allowed yourself to get into. Like see, this sage Bharat Muni was on the verge of realization, and he would have realized in a matter of maybe a few days or months. While he was in deep meditation, a mother deer was running. Mother means she is not yet delivered. Heavily pregnant deer was running, and a hunter was chasing after her. So in all this noise, he was disturbed. So he opened his eyes and he saw this. And that hunter shot the mother as she delivered. So the infant survived, mother died. He saw this and perfectly humanitarian action. He went, reached out to the infant and took care of the infant, because if he hadn't done it, the infant would have died. Again, perfectly normal, natural thing to do. But as he continued doing it day after day, what happened? His mind got attached to that deer. And while meditating, instead of meditating on Om, what was he meditating on? The deer. So, this is a case of a person who's on the verge of realization. He's free from all other attachments and desires. Right? Such a highly evolved person, even he can fall. And then you know what happened? He had to go through an entire janma as a deer. And only after that he got realization. What a tragedy. When you're on the verge of 99.9999% developed, one thought, one attachment can take you away. But this is the case of Bharat Muni. Where are we? Today somebody comes and says, come, let's go watch a movie, off you go. Tomorrow somebody comes and says, chalo yaar, let's play mahjong, off you go. Then mahjong takes over your whole life. And there's a lady I know who goes, her full-time occupation is going to weddings. How she manages to get invited to so many weddings, I don't know. So how many weddings in a year do you attend? Very few, right? But here she's, all the time she's going around the world. So ask her, where are you going? Oh, next week I'm going to Dubai. Why? Wedding. Then in February, where are you going? I'm going to Jaipur. Why? Wedding. Then April, where are you going? New York. Why? Another wedding. So this is it. When you don't have a program, when you don't have a goal, it's not that other people are not invited to weddings. But they decide which wedding to attend, which wedding not to attend. But if you are only looking for entertainment, then you'll be waiting to be invited to a wedding, party, birthday, this, that. So the Gita Jayanti is meant to get you back, centered. And when you're centered, you're powerful. Every thought, every action becomes, you shake the world with it. It's like that. And this needs to be cultivated in us. You must fix a goal for yourself. What are you living for? What are you working for? So, on this day, what must we do? Pay homage to the Bhagavad Gita, which means first of all be grateful that we as a nation, as a race, have this most wonderful, most precious knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita available to us. Right? And we are benefiting from it. So, as an act of gratitude, what must we do? Help spread the knowledge. How do we do that? Next week, when you come, and you have one whole week to prepare for it, make up your mind that you will bring at least 2 more people to the class. Introduce the Gita to 2 more people. It's not that difficult. Speak to your friends, speak to your neighbors. You're speaking anyway to hundreds of people. Just get 2 people. But to get those 2 people, you need to talk to, 10, 20 maybe. But that in itself becomes so fulfilling, because for the first time in your life, you're doing something where there is no direct return to you, no profit to you. So that's one thing you can do. Second thing is, we have 5 books. You can take the books and gift them. All are based on the Gita, different aspects of the Bhagavad Gita. Gift it to people. To a nephew, to a niece. Like this morning, I met a girl who's in the 10th standard studying at a school. So she was talking about how not to get nervous before a test. She had a test today. And so I was explaining to her some basic things that you need to do. And she said, after the test was over, she came back and told me, thank you so much for telling me this, because I think I will get at least 15 more marks because I applied what you said. And then she said, this must be taught to all children. How not to get nervous. You see, when you get nervous, your mind is agitated. Access to your own knowledge is not available to you, which you have worked so hard to get. You studied hard, but you get nervous minutes before the test or exam. It's all gone. How not to let that happen? Simple things like this the Gita teaches. So whether it is a student or a homemaker or in relationships or at work, you get these little tips. So help people to benefit from this. And for those of you who are really interested, the same scheme that was available at Bharati Vidya Bhavan, we're making it available here for you for just this one day, which is you get 6 sets of books, you get them at half price, which means each book will cost only 150 rupees. Now, isn't that a steal? You give a gift of a book. To you, it costs only 150, but to the recipient, it's precious. Like this, you can do so much. You can help spread, introduce people to the YouTube videos that we have. We have so many videos on YouTube. We have so much on social media, Instagram, Facebook, etc. Introduce it to people. It's for free. You just have to open your mouth. For which you must have this desire to serve people and the cause. So, yeah, there are various things that you can do. Anyway, coming back, we'll move now to verse 35.
भयाद्रणादु परतं मंस्यन्ते त्वां महारथाः येषां च त्वं बहुमतः भूत्वा यास्यसि लाघवम्.
So, Krishna understands that Arjuna has value for other people's opinions, like most of us have. But if you are a person who's clear about your goal, what you're doing, etc., you don't care what people think of you. Like during the independence movement, all the people who worked for independence didn't care what their neighbors said about them. Or a person who's committed to veganism, to promoting vegetarian food, because meat eating is the greatest contributor to global warming. Such a person won't bother about what others say. But Arjuna doesn't belong to that category. He is a warrior, he likes public opinion. So Krishna is playing on his psychology. So in any communication, psychology plays a very important role. So you have to understand the mindset of the person who's listening to you and tweak your message according to that person's particular personality. Then you get through. Then there's a chink in the armor, because all of us have this armor on it that we are impervious to what other people say. But if you say something that connects with the person, then straight it goes through like an arrow. So it's working. Krishna is a master psychologist. He knows exactly what Arjuna's weaknesses are, what his strengths are. So he hits and it goes through. Arjuna values others' opinions, other warriors. And this brings, see, when you have excessive value for other people's opinions, it springs from an inferiority complex, that you think less of yourself. That's why you're so dependent on what did so-and-so say, what does so-and-so think. But outstanding people, like a Bradman, a master in cricket, won't worry about what you and I say, our opinion of him, because he understands we are in ignorance. Or a musician of outstanding caliber understands the audience doesn't understand. So if they clap at the most ridiculous things, and when the musician really comes up with something brilliant, they don't react. So he understands. Most people get carried away by fame, name, following, and then it's heady. You can see it. Everyone wants to take selfies with you. I don't understand this craze for selfies. You want to take a selfie with a celebrity. You think all his achievements will rub off onto you just because you take a selfie? But people get carried away. And then they are unprepared for the fall that is bound to happen. See, because you're boosted by public opinion. And public opinion is very fragile. One person says something bad about you, finish, the whole structure falls apart. It's like a pack of cards that's built. You build a castle with a pack of cards. You just blow on it, the whole thing falls apart. So such people are more concerned with other people's opinions rather than what they are themselves. They do nothing about themselves. They're totally dependent on other people. So it causes maximum agitation, maximum suffering. Instead, be committed to some goal that you have. First of all, you must fix a goal. Be committed to it. And then you know your level. You understand, like, let's say financially, You know what you are, right? You know you're not at, what is his name? Musk's level. You know you're not at ordinary middle class, you're somewhere in between. So if somebody else makes a mistake and places you higher, how can you feel flattered? You know the guy is making a mistake. Similarly, if somebody puts you down, you just understand the person is making a mistake. You know? You don't get influenced, you don't get affected. The best of people are unconcerned with what other people think of them. 36.
अवाच्यवादांश्च बहून् वदिष्यन्ति तवाहिताः निन्दन्तस्तव सामर्थ्यं ततो दुःखतरं नु किम्.
Your enemies will slander you and deride your power. Could there be anything more sorrowful than this? See, in verse 35, he says, your equals will think badly of you. Now he is saying, even your enemies will slander you. This is much worse. Now, Arjuna earlier did not respond to reason because Krishna gave the highest knowledge. So, Krishna has no choice but to come down to his level. There is no philosophy here. Intellect awakens only in verse 54, and that too partially, because he asks who is a man of perfection. Now that is a good question, but not at that time. He is faced with a battle. In the middle of a battlefield, you don't ask who is a Sthita Prajna. So this is partial awakening. Krishna knows he's hit the right spot, so he's hammering it in. Next verse, 37.
हतो वा प्राप्स्यसि स्वर्गं जित्वा वा भोक्ष्यसे महीम् तस्मादुत्तिष्ठ कौन्तेय युद्धाय कृतनिश्चयः.
If killed, you will go to heaven. If victorious, you will enjoy the earth. Tasmat, therefore, O Kaunteya, arise and be committed to fight. So, Krishna has observed that Arjuna is reacting to this. So, he quickly points out the benefits. What will happen? In verse 2, Krishna has said, you behave like this, Arjuna, you will neither get success, nor fame, nor realization. And it is most un-Aryan-like, means un-Indian-like your behavior. The beauty of our culture is just to perform your karyam karma, your obligation. That's the highest quality of action that anybody could perform. And leave the rest. Then what will happen? Then you become a sannyasi, a yogi, says chapter 6, verse 1. So focus on obligation, everything else will follow. You don't have to worry about, oh, what will happen to me? How will I make a living? How will I make ends meet? Such questions are asked by ordinary people. You're not ordinary, you're extraordinary. Live up to that. So set aside likes and dislikes, set aside desire from the past, set aside anxiety for the fruit, and just plunge into action. This moment, what is it that I ought to do? Do it wholeheartedly. Fruit will be yours. So, as long as your mind shifts from the present to the past and future, it agitates your mind. Then you're not focusing. You don't know what you're doing. You make mistakes, errors. First thing that happens is you don't achieve success. Whatever you're working for, you don't achieve that. Second, you become an unhappy person. And third, desires develop.
When you are performing action, you said the performance of the action is the fruit of the action. So that should be moment to moment.
No, when you perform obligation, obligatory duty, right? Just the performance of the obligatory duty has already given you the result. What is the result? It purifies you of vasana. So what other result do you want? What other fruit do you want? You've already got the highest fruit.
So that's how you go along.
Yes, from action to action. One obligatory action to another. So that way what happens is you find fulfillment in the action. So your desires wane away because you're not concerned with desires anymore. Your interest in desires wanes away. So both ways you benefit. Materially you get the fruit, which is success. Spiritually you get evolution.
So there are some things that you know that this is your obligation. Some things you don't figure out.
Yes, some things, well, most things you know what is obligatory for you to do, what is not obligatory. There are occasional areas where you may have a doubt. So you consult the intellect, let the intellect think about it, and then you come to a decision. It doesn't matter whether you're right or wrong. What matters is that you're using your intellect and your intention is good. You want to do what is obligatory. Then later you might change. You might take other factors into consideration and say, no, what I thought earlier was wrong and now I need to correct it. If it's a very important action, you consult a wise person. A person who has more clarity. Okay? So, if the present action is perfect, the fruit is assured to you, you get it. Then you're happy doing it. Because the law is that unselfish people will be happy. And desires drop, so you got everything. You don't need to look anywhere else for fulfillment. Obligatory duty gives you success, gives you happiness and spiritual growth. Desire driven, the moment you go to the area of desire, you're caught. You're imprisoned in that desire. So what happens? Because you want the fruit so badly, your attention shifts from the present action to anxiety for the fruit. Mind gets agitated. You're not concentrating on the present. Present action gets flawed. You make mistakes. Result is failure. Example, sitting for an exam or a job interview or a performance, Wherever I speak, when people invite me to speak, there's always someone who's giving the introduction. So he has to speak only for 2 minutes and I have to speak for 1 hour. For those 2 minutes, they get so nervous, so panicky, they can't complete a sentence properly. This is their state. Why do they get nervous? You're making an appearance on stage for 2 minutes. What difference does it make? Whatever you say, nobody is listening. That's the first thing you must remember. Nobody is listening to you because they're waiting for the main show to start. So in those 2 minutes, you give your best and get out as quickly as possible. No, but people get nervous. Next verse, 38.
सुखदुःखे समे कृत्वा लाभालाभौ जयाजयौ ततो युद्धाय युज्यस्व नैवं पापमवाप्स्यसि.
This is a magnificent verse. There are some verses in the Gita that if you're serious about it, learn it by heart. The Sanskrit itself. Then you must know the translation and live it. Like you're listening to it now. This one verse you pick up and for the next 1 week, try and live it. What does it say? Sukha dukkhe, viewing equally joy and sorrow, profit and loss, victory and defeat, prepare for war. You will then not incur sin. Prepare for war means don't go fighting with people, please. Prepare for war in Arjuna's context. In our context, prepare for work. All of us are working, right? All of us have to do some work. How must we approach our work? Our work, our minds are polluted by this. We're constantly buffered. We rise with profit, sink with loss. Rise with joy, sink with sorrow. We're going through this roller coaster ride. In that, develop balance, samam, neutrality, equanimity. How do you achieve that equanimity? Huh? How do you achieve equanimity? Exactly. See? You're a gentleman who lives in Pune. He's been attending the classes for a long time, but missed because he was in Pune. He's just come. Straight away he got the answer. Why? Obviously he's thinking. How do you develop this equanimity, rise to something higher? You're a full-grown adult now, right? Suppose you're playing a game of Ludo or Monopoly with a child. How would you view victory and loss? Will it make any difference to you? Are you going to lose sleep whether I lost one game of Ludo? No, it doesn't matter to you. Whether you win or lose, you still enjoy the game beautifully. You're having a great time because your objective in playing the game is not to win. What is your objective? To give the child a pleasurable time, an enjoyable time. You're keeping the child engaged, your grandchild or child or whatever. So there are times when you actually cheat to lose because you want the child to gain the pleasure of winning. The child is at a lower level, affected by whether she wins or loses. You are at a higher level, you're an adult. You couldn't care less whether you win or lose. That's the trick. When are you going to rise? Now, as adults, physical adults, we are worse than children. The game of Ludo also we can't take properly. You must understand, you're in business. You've made roaring profits for 10 years. One transaction you lose, you're sitting there crying for 6 months. Huh? First of all, you must understand, business means profit and loss. You will never get only profit all your life. If you want that, join Mantralaya. Huh? No loss. But you won't get the profits that you're earning now. You can't have it your way all the time. Joy and sorrow, these pairs of opposites and are part and parcel of life. You must accept that and figure a way out of affectation. How do I not get affected? Number one, understand this is the truth. Number two, rise to a higher level. Fix a higher goal. then it doesn't matter to you. Calmness is what enables you to win under any circumstance. Whether you make a profit or loss, whether you go through joy or sorrow, whether you experience birth or death, you maintain that summum, you have won. You have won against the world. The world then loses the power to affect you. Huh? World no longer has the currency to control you.
So ma'am, this happens when you connect with Atma.
No, not necessarily.
Even with something lower than
Anything higher. So let's say you are dedicated to the country. Like for instance, Amul. They started a cooperative dairy to help the marginal farmers. Then it didn't matter whether Amul as a company made loss or profit, because they were dedicated to something else. The Tata Group of Industries, all their profits go in charity. The dividend that they earn goes to charity. Do you know that? It's a world record. No other company in the world functions like this. So if I were a true Tata employee, or if I were the chairman of Tata, I wouldn't be bothered if one odd company made a loss. You understand? Because there is no personal angle to it. It all goes to a cause. This doesn't mean they're indifferent to it. That's tamas. Rajas means you're affected. You're in a state of sattva where you're dedicated to something higher, therefore you're not affected. You get it? Yes? No?
So, what do we want to have below Atma?
Oh, there are several levels below Atma.
In the world.
See, if you are committed to your family, let's say, then it doesn't matter whether you lose your job, as long as the family together is doing well. So automatically, one step higher than just me is my family. Then from family you move to community. And then you're working for all community members, that every member of my community should be gainfully employed, should be happy, should be comfortable. Then if one day you're not comfortable, it doesn't bother you. Then the country, where you say that every beggar, every person who doesn't get food to eat, 3 meals a day, bothers you. And you're working for them. So it doesn't matter that one day you don't have fruit to eat, you don't care that much. So it's like that. And the highest is realization, God. Get it? So the affectation keeps reducing as you go higher and higher. And when you fix realization as a goal, nothing affects. You're totally immune. So, therefore, what is of prime importance is you must fix a higher goal. Higher goal means anything beyond your selfish, self-centered interests. Then there will be no desire for that particular fruit, because your attention is on the goal. And you find 100% joy in the action. You enjoy that action, whatever that action be. Right? So it could be anything. It could be cooking a meal. It could be making a cup of tea for someone. It could be giving a lecture. It could be anything. So see, even there, giving a lecture on the Gita, If you're doing it for your self-purification, if you're doing it as your contribution towards the cause, then you don't sit there alone, sorrowful that only 25 people came. If less people come, what difference does it make? If you communicate to one person, really communicate, you've done your job. This is not like a Bollywood thing or that pop stars come, they have lakhs of people. That's it. You know, the subtler you go, the higher you go, the less people are attracted. That's the very nature of life. Even in consumer products, a Rolls Royce is not advertised. Do you know that? When was the last time you saw an ad for Rolls Royce? Maruti cars you see here all the time. The most expensive watch in the world, you may not have even heard the name, the brand name, because it's not advertised. That's what it is. Titan watches you will see hundreds of ads. So you have to decide where is your level. I don't mean in terms of cars or watches. In terms of thought, what is your level? And then you understand Swami Ramatirtha had only 2 disciples. So as long as I have more than 2 people sitting there, I am happy. You understand? But what an impact he had. Sri Ramakrishna did not leave the temple premises in which he was living all his life. He didn't step out of it. But there is no place in the world today which does not have a Ramakrishna mission. This is the power. You must understand that and be grateful that you're a part of this wonderful movement at transformation, transforming yourself from an ordinary person to the extraordinary immortal that you already are. So no one's doing you a favor. So if a billionaire is going around begging on the streets, what would you say to him? What would you go and say to him? Why are you doing this? Don't you know that you can buy the whole city if you want? It's all yours. And he says, what are you talking? I don't even have 20 rupees. He says, ignorance, sheer ignorance. So every time you fall for something, every time you behave in a disgusting manner, every time you're selfish, you must kick yourself and say, get up. This is not your dignity. You know? Wake up. You have to tell yourself, because no one else knows. And no one else cares. What do they care what you do with yourself? But you know. And you should care. Every time you waste your time going here, there, everywhere. Any club you go to, even the so-called most prestigious club, go there and see who are the guys who come there every day. Every day. People who have nothing to do with themselves. No kam dhanda, they'll come to the club. You have something meaningful to do, you have something important to do, you won't waste your time in a club doing whatever it is. Once in a way you may go there. You think Ratan Tata would appear at Willingdon Club? There's better things to do. You think Mr. Ambani will appear at CCI? If they do, then their companies go down. So if you are going there often, What does it mean? Get it? Or anywhere, to a movie, to a restaurant. People who have important things to do don't have the time to waste. And if you're wasting your time, it's not just 1 hour, half an hour that you're wasting a lifetime. Over and over again. No? Because you're cultivating a desire to hang around Willingdon Club. So you will live there, Janmas together.
You talk about Swadharma and working hard in your field of but what about the philosophy and windfall profits and gains which you make? The person does not have to work. And what can know? I'm part of it also. So you make wealth without working. And I don't know. Today everything is moving. The cryptos are people are making crores of rupees. The stock market is moving. So people are not working. I know people who are doctors and engineers who have left for their job and doing stock market trading, and they are making lots of money. So they have left their job of what they are. And so what kind of how does one take it?
See, the question is,
You are not working for that money.
a person who makes a windfall, no? Tremendous profit he makes a lot of money. That's what he's saying. It's the stock market, he's made money. There are students who have made money. And now the point is, you don't work for money. You get it? You work for something beyond it. Money comes automatically. So, people at a certain level need to work for money. Huh? Who are these people? A clerk, a labor class. As you go above that, then you're no longer working for money. You're working for the excitement of the work. Like a cricketer, Sachin Tendulkar, or forget Sachin Tendulkar, now he's old, Virat Kohli, is not playing cricket for money. Nadal doesn't play tennis for money. They play for the love of the game. A cricketer, a musician, an athlete, one second, listen to the complete thing. So when you're working for the love of it, and you make a fortune, you don't stop acting, you don't stop working, because that which is motivating you continues to motivate you. Then you work for the country, let's say. You're like this Neeraj Chopra. I assume he's made a lot of money. He doesn't stop. He continues because he wants to win one more gold for the country, as long as he can. Then the highest is like Eric Liddell. Eric Liddell was a Scottish gentleman who won the Olympic gold for the 400-meter race in 1932 or something. He used to say, God made me to run and I will run for God. So now he is not acting for anything in the world. He is acting for God. He believes that God made me to run. What else will I do except run for God? And what a way he ran. Unbeatable. So if as you go up the ladder, money becomes immaterial. Okay?
They are acting in their field. I am talking about a person who does not act in just money.
They are ignorant people. And anyone who stops working because he has enough money is going downhill. He's a tamasic fool. You have to do you understand? The body needs to work. The mind needs to be engaged. If you're not doing anything, you just go downhill. They have observed that Supreme Court judges in the United States The moment they retire, their intellectual level falls. And these are Supreme Court judges. That is why they need to continue practice just to keep their brains functioning. Not that they want money. So when you understand, I have to work as long as I am alive. The question is, what do I work for? And such people who stop working because they've made money. If you see how they've made money, through tamas. Stockbroking is, what are you doing? Are you working? No, you're sitting there making money on somebody else's hard work. Fundamentally flawed. It's like a gambler. It's a slightly better quality of gambler. That's it.
But that means we are disqualified from spirituality.
No, nobody is disqualified. But it's a tamasic action. That you must understand. It's like going to the races and saying, I hit 3 jackpots, now I'll retire. At 28, I will stop working. Then what will he do? Because he has to do something, so he'll take to tamasic activities like drinking, drugging, drugs, gambling. That's all there is. So never should you stop working. If you've made enough money, just say, God has given me the opportunity to do service for others. You may have enough, but there are so many people who don't have enough. You may have enough money, but you don't have happiness. Work for it.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
A lot of people have this feeling that making money in the stock market is easy. But I have seen a lot of people.
No, one sec. We are not talking about stock market. Okay, so don't. That's not the point. Is that okay? See, this is how we go at a tangent.
I think because what?
No, not what you said.
Because of the if your talent is only in speculation and you're doing that.
Fine, if that is your swadharma, even that you can do to help others. I know a gentleman in Delhi who says, I've made enough money and I continue to make money. But I want to see how I can use my expertise in helping others also make money. So he helps ordinary middle class people to invest their little money wisely so that they get better returns on their money. See, the unfortunate part is because of lack of knowledge and lack of expertise in money management, people who have less, like middle class people, don't have the knowledge, so they don't get the proper returns on what little they have. Huh? And they don't have access to it because of other people charge.
And there's a lot of missing.
Correct. Okay? So once you understand this and you want to, when your attitude changes from grabbing to giving, contributing, adding value to others, you find your way. There are a million ways in which you can do service. So you can continue this, but use this wisely. Like that movie, what was it? Henry Sugar.
I was always feeling guilty that whether I am working sufficiently to what I am earning.
No, don't feel guilty. You are earning a lot of money, be happy. But help others. Let your money go towards the right cause or your free time to help others who have less, who have been less fortunate than you.
Dynamically developing the intellect. And then he says that you have to be a witness to everything. So how does it function parallelly?
The question is, we talk a lot about acting dynamically, wholeheartedly, give 100% of yourself to your work. And at the same time, we say, be objective. That's what he's saying, right? How does it go together? In fact, it is only when you're objective that you can be dynamic. If you're involved, a lot of your energies goes in just attachment, in anxiety, in mental agitation. Whereas when you're objective, see, there is that fine balance between acting as if your life depends on it. So dynamism is there, everything is there. Knowing fully well that it doesn't matter. How does this work? Have you seen a brilliant actor? That actor plays his role so beautifully, so brilliantly, that we, the audience, gets involved with that, knowing fully that it's a movie. We get involved, we get attached, we are crying because we identify with the role. But he is unaffected. The moment the role is over, he quickly gets back to his personality. So it could be, for instance, that the role that he is playing, he is debating whether to commit suicide or live. But that day happens to be his wedding anniversary. So he calls his wife and says, sit in the front row and I'll make a sign towards the end of my show. You go out, wait in the car, I'll run and come and we'll celebrate. So you see the difference? In the role that he's playing, he's debating whether to live or die. 2 minutes later, he celebrates. So when you're fully, to the extent you're objective, you're able to do both. You're unaffected by whatever is happening in the role that you're playing, and yet you're doing it so wholeheartedly that people who are watching you, they get carried away. But if you are involved, attached, you make mistakes. It's like a child, in school they have shows for entertainment. They put up a show, children. And the child knows what her role is and everything. But she enters stage and she's looking for her parents. Where are her parents? She forgets her role, she forgets her lines. The teacher has to come and escort her away, off stage. That's what we do. We get involved in the 2-bit role that we have, we get involved, mess it up. And we have to leave the scene. Okay? So think about it. Objectivity and dynamism go together.
So when Vedanta says that be a witness, it means act without attachment.
Yes, be objective. Witness means objective. Sakshi bhav. Next verse. Oh, sorry. So, then you're unaffected by the result. Whatever be the result. You're celebrity, everybody claps for you, or you're denounced. It doesn't make any difference to you. Because you're not working for that. So, wrong action is when you get involved, your mind is agitated, intellect clouded, action flawed, vasanas increase. Every which way you get hit. You see, at every level you get hit. From the gross to the subtle. It's wrong all the way. Right action is where the mind is calm, intellect is sharp, action brilliant, vasanas reduce. So any action you perform, you must see to what extent is my mind calm. To that extent your intellect will be sharp, action will be brilliant, your vasanas will reduce. Otherwise, it's a monk's game and all of us are performing wrong action. 39.
एषा ते भिहिता साङ्ख्ये बुद्धिर्योगे त्विमां शृणु बुद्ध्या युक्तो यया पार्थ कर्मबन्धं प्रहास्यसि.
O Partha, the Sankhya knowledge has been declared to you. Now hear the knowledge of yoga by which you can break the bondage of action. Buddhi yoga is a term that he is coined now. So, verse 39 is the turning point between Sankhya knowledge and action. So, now onwards he is talking about action. But he uses the term Buddhi yoga. Buddhi yoga is karma yoga, means action performed with the buddhi. So why does he use a different term? Because suppose he were to say karma yoga, say, of course I know what it is. He wants you to think. So he is using a different term. So Sankhya is a sequence of logical thought arriving at an irrefutable conclusion, a rational conclusion. That is what he has been speaking so far. So Vedanta is a clinical, scientific, rational knowledge. There are no grey areas here. There are no ifs and buts. There is no magic. You don't pull a rabbit out of a hat. Everything is clear. Nothing vague or ambiguous. And that is why intellectual people find it so satisfying. If you are a rational person, it's so satisfying. If you do this, this will happen. If you don't want this to happen, you must do something different. It's not that you go to a temple 3 times and you put X amount in the hundi and everything will be okay. No. Nothing is going to be okay if your thoughts don't change. So, Buddhi yoga means karma yoga performed with the buddhi, intellect, and the deeper the conviction with which you perform that action, the more intense is your intention, the purer your intention, the greater the impact that it has. You don't need to have oratory, you don't need to have any of that, just plain and simple, deep-rooted, pure intention. Like if a mother has deep intention that the child should do well, just the thought is enough, it happens. But nowadays I find mother is in competition with the child. If people praise the child, nobody is thinking of me. I got a message today from the husband saying everyone's praising the daughter, nobody is saying anything about the mother. Mother can't find happiness in the child's success. What kind of a mother is she? You see? So, that purity. That's why Christ said, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. So as you go home today, think of this. How do I purify myself? How do I make my intent intense? For anything. You just give of yourself 100% to anything you do. Whether it is simple thing like giving a glass of water to somebody or an earth-shaking thing, it doesn't matter. What matters is the purity. So where does your action spring from? Just routine? Then it's monotonous, boring. But if you have a powerful emotional motive, by God, miracles happen. If your action is backed by a strong intellectual conviction, then you become a Yuga Pravartak, world changer. And if you're motivated by just Atman, because you want to get to Atman, the forces of nature bow down to you. Okay? Thank you. We end with a prayer. Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you.